So, welcome to the Rise of the Super Being. I'm Vanderson Pires, and my guest today is Ajahn Kusalo. So, before we get into, I just would like to say a few things. So, one, if you looking to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, our sponsor is Combat Room Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So, if you're keen to learn in a friendly, safe, and skillful environment, please come to see me and my team. You can find more information at www.combatroom.co.nz. Also, you can watch this podcast on YouTube or listen on Spotify and so many other platforms. So, Ajahn, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure to have you here. You've been a really good friend and a really mentor in my life. Since I went to the first retreat, that was really interesting how I discovered something about the mind for me was a dream. It was impossible to even conceive that idea of being peaceful. And I experienced that in one of the retreats I did with you. So for the ones who doesn't know, so those retreats of 10 days of silence and meditation and fasting as well. So that was a massive influential thing on my life. So yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you as well. So thank you for your time. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I'd like to start with the most fundamental question. How did you become a monk?
More a question of why. Becoming a monk is relatively easy, but the path that leads to that decision. So my general response these days, I put the question out there: who wants to be happy? Everybody puts their hand up. So how are you going to do that? So my life as a young man, and mostly in New Zealand, the pursuit through sensuality, sex, drugs and rock and roll, that kind of thing, travel, money, food, alcohol, drugs, all of that. That's the general idea, making money so you can buy those things and all the accessories and the things that are going to make you happy. That's the general proposition. So I put a lot of effort into that. And I can't say I was a failure, because I'm quite good at working with the world and doing things in the world. Quite skilled in that way, I guess. But there's always a sense of dissatisfaction. It just didn't quite... Always sort of, so you go to a party and it's all good and there's nice food and you're with a pretty girl and all this sort of thing. Then there's the next morning and I don't know. Then you just do it again the next weekend. For me, it just left me feeling a bit hollow. There seems to be, part of that. It's hard to analyse exactly the factors, but growing up in the 60s, I was born in 52, so 60s and 70s, the whole hippie era. Took to that big time. That was because I wasn't happy, the idea of getting married, getting the mortgage, career, for whatever reason, didn't totally make sense. And the hippie thing was an alternative, was an out. So, grew my hair long and tried that. Co-founded a commune on Great Barrier Island back in 1970-something.
Whereabouts?
Great Barrier Island, just out of Auckland. That's still going after a fashion. So we're still basically friends. The dynamics have changed considerably, but so I've always generally inclined. I like community, being with people, groups of people, doing things with people. But again, the limitations. The whole hippie free love ideal. I remember the Love Shop in Auckland. They set up, the idea was that people would bring things and give them, and people could come and take them. And of course they ended up with nothing,
Uh,
because there were just so many more takers than givers. So that imbalance in that ideal, I just kept meeting that generally in terms of the idea of being happy. So yeah, I developed an interest in philosophy, different religions. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on in that era. A lot of cults, and some of them derived from traditional streams, some of them just as wacky as... I had a go at quite a good number, and generally found myself inclining more to the traditional forms. Short story, I met monks of the tradition that I'm now part of. Met monks in Western Australia. They had a house in the city at that time. I was quite sceptical, cynical even. Started going along. And I thought, oh yeah, go again. Oh yeah, go again. And the consistency of both as individuals, but what I started to draw out from the Buddha's teaching. One, it's accessible by logic, and two, there's a consistency. I mean, there's an incredible amount of teachings. The Buddha had a 45-year ministry, so there's a lot of scriptures, if you will, and they're consistent. You read one, you think it lines up. There's no glaring contradiction there. So over time, I was in West Australia for 2 years, and then I went and lived in Asia for a year, and then came back to West Australia, picked up with that Buddhist group, and then Ajahn Sumedho, who's probably the most, I think, certainly one of the more senior monks of our tradition, he came to Perth 2 consecutive years, and I did retreats, meditation retreats, just a bit, as you were saying. Similar thing, just like, whoa, there's a lot of space in there. You close your eyes and allow all the rubbish and the noise and the static to settle down, which it does quite naturally if you're patient enough. Allow that to settle, and it was quite revelatory for me. And the second retreat I did, it's some kind of an experience. How do we define these things? But I was had a family at the time, so I had responsibilities there. We came back to New Zealand, sorting things out. I was single parenting for a few years. But anyway, I was pretty clear that to investigate further, explore this monastic life, and short story, the monastery and Stokes Valley, I went there. That was being developed, and same thing again. It just kept coming up, positive all the time. So eventually, when I fulfilled my responsibility with my son, I came and lived there. So it wasn't any anguishing decision. It was just a natural progression, actually.
And what you used to do before you became a monk, Ajahn? So you used to live in Auckland, right?
Grew up in Auckland, yeah. Building industry, mostly. I qualified as a quantity surveyor, had a small construction company after that, ran a craft market, drove trucks, sold coffee, dug holes. But yeah, I mean, the building, I like making things. So construction in the broader sense, it ended up going more detailed. So coach building motorhomes, cabinet making. So that's sort of where I ended up before, at a factory in West Australia for a few years, and then built my own home. Never really lived in it.
Yeah.
But, you got to build your own house if you don't build your own boat. And, moved to the monastery. The rest is history. I mean, I'm surprised. We just finished our winter retreat period, which measures a monk's age. So I'm now 28 years a monk. And I sometimes think, God, amazing.
28 years as a monk.
Yeah,
Wow.
I mean, that's Yeah.
That's impressive.
Well, impressive. It's surprising for me.
And Ajahn, what's the daily routine of a monk? So what's your daily life as a monk?
Well, the monastery, we do have a general pattern. Starts at 5:15. We have a community meeting. And this is not particularly me specifically, but so there's some chanting, meditation, sometimes some teaching. Then we have a domestic chores, cleaning, usually cleaning around different areas of the monastery. Have a breakfast together, just some cereal or something relatively simple. And then a work period for a couple of hours or so.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment we've been working with these fallen pine trees I mentioned to you.
Yeah.
So I'm really quite sore at the moment. But physical work, I personally think is a really good aspect of monastic life, particularly for younger guys, to have some physical activity. Anyway, that's by the way. So then 10:30 we have our main meal of the day. Our last meal of the day, so we don't eat after midday. Afternoons are pretty much up to the individual. Sometimes there might be things that need attending to. Come out and chat with Vanderson.
Yeah.
That's the exception. And then we have sometimes we have a communal tea. It's a kind of optional. We have a common room. You can go and the monks can have a cup of tea together, or and then another meeting at 7:00 in the evening. Again, chanting, meditation, sometimes some reflections on the Buddha's teaching. It usually finishes about 8:30, maybe. Some monks will go and drink more coffee. Some will check their emails. Some will read a book. Some will do some more meditation. But so there's this balance of community and individual, being together and being alone. So it's probably, I don't know, what would it be, 60-40? With the emphasis on solitude. So there's enough communal activity.
Talking about community, what's so interesting, and I would like to talk a little bit about the fasting as well, because it was so interesting when I discovered fasting for the first time before, because now fasting became a little bit, on trendy and everyone is talking about fasting. But the first time, I practiced that even without knowing the benefits was on the retreat. So tell a little bit about how the monastery is created, because that it's entirely supported by the community, right? So as a monk, you guys are not allowed to, so you guys don't earn any money.
I'm just going to jump back because the question about fasting.
Yeah.
we skipped over that because it is important what it represents. I mean, often people talk about fasting in the context of food, so not eating. But if you think of fasting as just the limitation of activity, so in the Pali language, our scriptural language, we talk about kamma, Sanskrit karma, so quite similar. So our action has results. So the idea that what you consume as through action, that partly defines who you are. So if you're consuming with the eyes, cop shows and shoot 'em ups and pornography and stuff like that, you're feeding on that. What does that do how does that constitute your being? In the same way as if you're eating lots of hamburgers and fries and, we just eat what we're given pretty much. But that the concept of fasting, just a restraint of the senses, that you're being far more particular about what you consume. People stick these buds in their ears and just suck up what? I mean, it's art, it's music, really, I don't know. It's being consumed. Is it necessary? Is it healthy? Is it nutritious? In terms of that original problem, everyone wants to be healthy. Is it really making you healthy, or is it just providing an interesting distraction? As food does. We talk back to food.
Yeah.
You know, just these little, you know, nouveau cuisine, all these fancy little dishes with swirls and creatively cut cucumbers. And it's all very wonderful. But, you know, I mean, how much is it just like entertainment and distraction? Does it really nourish the soul? Does it really fulfill, bring happiness to the heart? So fasting, I mean, mostly I think people talk about food fasting and healthy, slim, trim figures and well, great, you know, better than being overweight and so forth. But fasting is the principle behind fasting, you know, from a monastic point of view. Anyway, I just had to get that in there.
Yeah, no, it's super important. Yeah. I was going to come back to this question. Yeah, but, you know, talking about the food, you know, and yeah, that was really interesting to experience that at the, you know, living with you at the monastery. And also another really important fact is every single thing at the monastery, it's provided by the community, right? It's donation-based, right?
Well, we have what we call an economy of gifts. We don't actually have a monetary economy. Of course, people give money because we have to pay the electric bill and things like that. But the idea is to encourage a reflection of what can I give anywhere now. You and me sitting here, what can I give you? Oh, and you're thinking, what can I give Ajahn Kusalo?
Yeah.
Another cup of tea.
Yeah.
So then, because capitalism, or so much of the dynamic of the world, is based on what can I get? What's in it for me? I'll do this for you. I'll sit and talk about things, but you have to come and, you know, cut some firewood, and you have to come and put the tent up next time, and you're obliged. You know, you owe me. And no, the idea is that I should somehow always be in credit because I've given. And quite naturally, the response to that is that people give back. The more we can give, the more we get, and it's a paradox. It's counterintuitive because it seems like I've got this stuff, and if I give it all away, I won't have any stuff. But I do see, you know, I mean, we do have the privilege in the monastery of being supported, but. It seems the more the community offers and puts out, creates opportunities for people to come, take care of the place and so forth, the more positive response we get, you know, the more support we get. We eat so well, as you know. we may only do one main meal a day, but my gosh, it's usually pretty delicious.
Yeah. And it's impressive how many communities. So we have the communities of Laos, the Chinese community, the Japanese community, the
Thai, Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka.
That'd be the main Sri Lankan, Thai. I mean, our roots of our tradition are in Thailand, Lao and Cambodian. And we are getting more, I guess it's just with general immigration, Japanese and Chinese people, Korean, some Vietnamese, Indonesian. Burmese also, it's Theravada country, but there's not that many Burmese people in New Zealand. But yeah, they usually come.
That's interesting. So Ajahn, what's the best thing of being a monk?
I mean, I could talk about the food, but no, really, the equation that many you see, people are cash rich and time poor. I'm time rich. I have no money. But I have a lot of time. And then the question is also, so how do I use? And that's the when people come to the monastery, back again to this idea of fasting, how much time gets spent, you know, getting the food, preparing the food, eating the food, especially if it's a social thing, you can spend like 2 hours over dinner, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then cleaning up and so forth. So we don't have to do that. So just the time. And how do you use that time? How do you... People say, oh God, I wish I could just stop. I'm so busy. But it's curious when people have the opportunity to stop, the momentum of their becoming, their energy doesn't stop. You know, it's sort of pushed along with that. It becomes a habit.
Mm-hmm.
So that again, that thing of fasting, just making a conscious choice to stop. So what do? Well, you don't have to do anything. I mean, keep breathing. So then, you know, I mean, leads into meditation, basically, as a tool to make inquiry into the dynamic of the mind, or the heart. The Pali word chitta has many kind of nuances, but it can be translated either as mind or as heart. And you often ask, you know, Westerners, you ask them where their mind is, they point to their head. You ask Asians, they point to their heart as a general thing. Mm-hmm. And it's both, you know. You know, what do you really feel in your heart? And that's assessing your overall experience or the nature of your being at this moment. What do you think? Mm-hmm. Obviously more analytical, but it's kind of the same question. So we're the sense of looking inwards to really get a clear perspective on what it is to be a human being. Mm-hmm. You know, there's so much that is done, that what people do, it's just habitual, unreflective. It's just Friday night you go to the pub, Saturday you have a barbecue, or is that Sunday? I don't know. Rent a movie, or you know, these things, they just become a habit. You do this, and then work obviously dictates for so many people because they don't have the benefits of the economy that we have. But again, that question, you know, how much of that is actually necessary, and how much of it truly nourishes the heart. I mean, talk about spirit and soul, which you don't really meet that terminology in the Buddha's teaching, but you know, those words resonate. Mm-hmm. They have they indicate something. And do they lead to peace, to calm, to serenity, to quietude, to, you know, the idea of relaxation? Let's go bungee jumping, you know, that's how relaxing is that? Uh-huh. Or whitewater rafting or something like that. So and it's not an end, we're not setting it up as an end, just the capacity to just simply be. So often in meditation, you know, make suggestions and say, you're actually giving yourself permission to allow your life to be this simple, just sitting and breathing. And you don't even have to breathe. The body will do that whether you're there or not, whether you're asleep or awake or paying attention. So just that sense of just simply sitting. So people often do, you know, like on a beach, watching the sunset, or, you know, there are times, often in nature, when people do naturally, because I think that's, you know, our natural state, in the things we do. They're an extension of that, but just that, the state of peace, quietude, calm, as a capacity.
Yeah, it's interesting to say about, you know, you not having money, but another story as well. When we went to work together at the Ramataka prison to teaching, you know, mindfulness and meditation there, and I always say this story because it was really funny. When we got there for the first time and you didn't even have ID. It was hard to get there because you didn't have ID, and it's so interesting, you know, because it's those small things we don't even think about as a lay person, about the necessity of carry, you know, those things, and in being a monk for 28 years, of course those things started disappearing slowly, right? The necessity of...
Yeah, you still now have a passport. I have 2 passports. I could have more if I wanted. But, I mean, it raises an interesting thought, because the fundamental question for me in religion is about identity. Who am I? Ultimately, not conventionally, I am Kusalo Bhikkhu, I am the abbot of the monastery, senior monk, I am son of Sybil and Jim, and so on and so forth. We talk about that, the conventions that define me, I am. But when those conventions, when that context is not there, who am I? So I often say, my standard line is, when I'm with my mother, I'm a son. When I'm with my son, I'm a father. When I'm with them both together, I'm totally confused. I don't know who I am. Should I be the son, or should I be the father, the son, or the holy monk? You know, the father, the son, and the holy monk. And that, because it's contextual. It's according to, you know, when you're in the office, you're a businessman or whatever. When you're in the supermarket, you're a customer. When you're in the wherever. You know, these things that define us. Interesting story, when my mother was sick one time, she lived in Australia, in Sunshine Coast, and I went to help with her. Anyway, she was in the hospital for a while. I was looking through her wardrobe for some clothing to take. Found a shoebox with $30,000 in it. Yeah. So I asked her about it, and she said, I said, we've got to put it in the bank. And she said, no, it'll upset my pension or something. She didn't want it in the bank. I said, no, look, you can't just leave that amount of money. So I went to the bank and said, well, I want to open an account. This thing about identity. Mm-hmm. It was so difficult to prove that my passport wasn't enough. They wanted at least 3 forms of identity, like a rental agreement, a utility contract, or so, you know, these kinds of things. I didn't have any of that. It took a long time to convince them to allow me to give them $30,000. You know, well, because I wanted to give it to them, but yeah, that question of identity. So when you go to a foreign country, you know, nobody knows who you are and your whole cultural reference points. I mean, you know, coming to New Zealand, I guess first time, different foods, different cultural, you know, activities, responses, just in terms of language and body language, all of those kinds of things are quite different. Yeah. And you, most people adapt, more or less, as humans are not so different, but yeah, the question of identity, once you strip away all of that contextual reference, you know, so like a meditation retreat, and you're just sitting there with your eyes closed, and who are you? And then you kind of, my name. Well, so who were you before you were given that name? When you're born, you weren't Vanderson. You didn't even know you were a boy at that time. And then they told you, oh, you're a boy. Oh, I'm a boy. And boys do this. Boys don't do that. No, girls do that. Boys don't do that. And so on, and so on, and so on. And it accumulates. And the aggregation of that is so readily believed. This is who I am. I am a man. Real men. You know, real men drink beer and play rugby. I drink tea and wear a dress. So, you know, am I a man? I mean, really? You know, I mean, biologically, I guess. But not just. So these kind of things, where the kind of questions where in meditation, in the silence and relative silence and stillness of the mind, we're asking these kinds of questions.
Yeah, it's so interesting because normally when I talk to people about meditation and in the retreats, but just for the idea of staying in silence with yourself, with your own thoughts, are so scary for most of people. And the response I always get from that is, wow, yeah, I'm scared of doing something like that, and it's so interesting. So how many people come to you with the same response when we talk about meditation?
No, I think most people that come have come because they're actually interested. They've gone through that. I mean, I just say whatever you've got, yeah, in terms of your mentality, in terms of your conditioning, your cultural background, all of that, your gender inclinations, your whatever you've got, that's what you've got. And the importance of taking responsibility, taking ownership for that. Not saying it's right or wrong, but just saying, we're going to open your closet. What's in the closet? Skeletons in the closet. I mean, we've all got, interesting bits from our childhood or, from our younger years or just from the past. Things we did, things we said, people we were connected with, related to, and so forth. If that's true, it's true. So why be afraid of the truth? And we need the idea is not necessarily to psychoanalyze, say, oh, my mother did this and my father did that, or they didn't do this, or all of that stuff. That's why I'm like this. Just a simple recognition that I am like this. I don't need to know why. I can just see when somebody says banana nose, I get angry. What's wrong with my nose? Why do people pick on my nose? I mean, they're funny things at the best of times. But the truth is, my nose is like this. My ears, my eyes, and my body, my intelligence, my everything is like this. And it can change. It will change. It has changed. And just to be able to give clear, open witness to all of that, all of it. Not to take it personally, just to see this is a condition that exists, and I don't have to. Hear the thing about the nose, but you're entitled to your opinion. I'm fine, it's worked like this for so many decades. It's good enough. You see the anguish that poor old Michael Jackson went through, about the colour of his skin and his hair and his nose.
Yeah.
It's suffering. It's not peace. There's a tension there between who I think I should be and who I actually am. And who am I? Well, right now, it's this. I mean, who I should be, well, I can change. And there's some areas, just conventionally, I can put an effort, I can learn to speak properly and better diction, and I can learn French or whatever. We can do these things, and these are the choices we make, but ideally we make them through clarity and wisdom rather than just through desire or fear. Kind of two sides of the same coin. The desire to get something is desire, and the desire to get rid of something is a kind of fear-based. So in meditation, really, you're just sitting down and opening the doors of consciousness. You need to calm the mind. So meditation technique is quite useful, just to establish a foundation, points of reference, to calm the mind, and then just watching, like a scientist almost. Just noticing things. Oh, look, why did I do that? Oh, that's funny. I never knew I did that before. And good friends can sometimes be useful. They can point out. That's why community is so beneficial. Living in a spiritual community, we're all, I wouldn't say exactly on the same page, but we're more or less going in the same direction. To be free of suffering, I mean, that's a pretty common thread.
That's so powerful. Yeah, the power of community. That's really powerful. So, John, what's your favorite technique for meditation? So, if someone comes to the monastery and never meditated before, so what's your first teaching? What's your first advice?
Well, we're so conditioned to activity. You want to get peace of mind, well, you've got to do something. You want to be relaxed, you've got to do something. You have a cold beer or a pizza and that. So we're very much conditioned to that. So the idea, rather than just saying, okay, sit down and be peaceful, it's a nice idea, but so what do I do? What do I do? How do I do that? So setting up, it's kind of going back to the sense of consumption around fasting and so forth. Where do I direct my attention, or how do I direct the energy of my mind in a way that's going to lead to calm and peace and clarity? We're looking for clarity, brightness of mind. So picking up something that's relatively less complicated, less busy, less noisy than what you normally do. So, pull the plugs out, turn the phone off, turn the TV off, turn the radio off, whatever, the sense of just making choices about moving towards calm, quiet, silence, stillness, relatively, rather than absolutely, just saying relatively. I used to have 3 radios on all at the same time. Now I only have 1. That's a movement. It is.
Yeah.
So taking that somewhat of a degree further, a meditation object, the most common one is the breath, and it's not exclusive to Buddhism by any. It's just a human function. That's very simple. It's rhythmical. It's natural, and you don't have to do it. So it's a question of directing your attention, your interest, focusing that, concentrating that on the breath. And even that can be quite a challenge, because you say direct your interest. What's so interesting about the breath? Really, you can't say it's exciting or wow, that was an amazing in-breath. Whoa, well, let's do that again. But the idea is that it's calming. So you can use supports like counting the in-breaths and the out-breaths, and then there's lots of permutations that you can do with that. Using phrases, like I often use peace, breathe in peace, breathe out, relax, and just repeat that. One of the classics in Asia is Buddho, which is kind of like an invocation from Buddha, from the root Bud, which is enlightenment. So an invocation of that concept, what is the Buddha, that which is wise, that which is enlightened. So Bud on the in-breath, Do on the out-breath, Buddho, Buddho. That's a common technique with the breath. But any activity, because awareness of the breath is something that you do, you make a conscious choice to do that, direct your energies and interest in that way. But any kind of activity that's relatively simple, so has a beginning, a middle and an end, and is repeatable. So I'd say things like yoga, just hatha yoga, just doing asana. They're defined, they're prescribed. Has a beginning, you do a routine of half a dozen postures or whatever. Tai Chi, the same. You're into martial arts.
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, yeah.
We can give it a plug. Get enlightened, sign up with Vanderson's group. But that kind of relative simplicity that requires a particular kind of focus, are you standing on one leg? Just stop. You need to concentrate, otherwise you fall over.
Yeah.
So a meditation object needs to be simple enough or clear enough, substantial enough so that you can actually hold it. Because if it's too subtle, you're losing it all the time. Yeah, like the breath for some people say, well, where's my breath? So, breath meditation and exaggerated in-breath and extend it, make it more visible. Oh, because people don't often notice their breath until they haven't got it. They've been running up the stairs or, they suddenly notice their breath. So an object that's big enough or tangible enough or substantial so that you can actually hold it, but subtle enough so that you need to make an effort to hold it. Because, a movie has a beginning, a middle and an end, and it's repeatable. You just hit rewind and But you know, I mean, you don't need to make much of an effort to follow some Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of Terminator something or other. You know, that is more is this the degree of interest. They design it particularly so the level of interest that's required is pretty small.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to make much effort.
Mm.
So with a meditation object, you need to look for something that's relatively simple.
Mm-hmm.
Shifting grains of sand. I don't know, you know, there's no end to the possibility, but the principle of relative simplicity. And if you just stick with it, it will calm the mind. Flower arranging. You know, the Japanese have culturally a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, ikebana and the brush painting and
The tea ceremony.
tea ceremonies. You know, you need to focus. You need to, and there's a certain state of mind that's very much encouraged with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not about production. It's not about efficiency. You know, it's more about the quality of the heart that's important. You know, the way you pour the tea and the little giving and taking and thing like that. And some people just, you know, why don't you just give me a cup of tea for goodness sake? Get on with it. But having the willingness to just be with a sunset, with the song of a tui, you know, just to stop, close one's eyes, just listen. We got a lot in the monastery. Just listen, and they're beautiful. They're nothing. I'm not trying to get anything.
Mm-hmm.
There's just an open receptivity there, receiving life, rather than kind of squeezing life, trying to demand that life give me something. Life will just give me what it... And, you know, there is input. It's not saying we just don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
We do make choices, but, yeah, keeping it fairly simple.
Mm-hmm. So, John, what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation?
I mean, mindfulness as a term has been kind of almost hijacked.
Yeah.
It started out, at least my understanding, John Kabat-Zinn in the States did clinical trials and studies and developed systems of mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based anger management. I've been involved in some of those trials in Wales. I was living there for a couple of years, up in, I can't remember where it was, one of the universities, with depression. So my general mindfulness, as it's generally promoted, is working with conditions. So it's a kind of a self-help thing. Okay, you've got anger, or you've got stress, or you've got depression, and these are particular conditions that you're experiencing, and those conditions were caused by other conditions, you know, parental, familial background, all that kind of stuff. And it's bringing a balance to that. It's kind of tweaking. You know, it's like Callan over here with his buttons and switching the cameras, and,
yes.
you know, well, that sort of thing, to get it right, to get the conditions so that it looks good and it sounds good, and there's nothing wrong with that. But from my sense of what the purpose of meditation is, to be able to clearly ascertain truth, the cultivate. So I use the term now more awareness. Same thing, really. But this quality of being awake or being aware. So I'd say, can you hear me speaking? Yeah, you nod your head. I'd say, how do you know? How do you know you can hear me?
That's powerful.
Well, because you know. And people often say, oh, because there's a vibration in my ear, or your lips are moving and I can understand the language. I said, well, how do you know there's a vibration in your ear? Or how do you know you can understand? So awareness or knowledge is imminent. It's always now. The power of now. You know, so just the pressure of my arm on the arm of the chair. You see that, the stiffness in my shoulders, because I've been working hard these last few days. swinging a chainsaw and all of that kind of stuff. I'm aware. You see, it's not right or wrong. It's just it's simple awareness. It's not about judgment. So mindfulness does kind of include that. It's an apprehension or a recognition of conditions without judgment. So that there's nothing per se wrong with being angry. Clearly the response to that energy, like punching somebody or worse, is not appropriate. But it misses that kind of space there. So it's about me and my anger. This anger is mine. This is not just a condition. Like this chair is a condition that I'm sitting in. It's quite useful. But it's not mine. It's not yours either. Mm-hmm. Most people would say, oh, this is Vanderson's chair. Be careful. So that sense of possession, and it's going back to identity again, is very contextual. Property rights. I often joke at the monastery. I point out the window and say, well, I'm the abbot of this monastery. I'm in charge around here. See those trees out there? They're my trees. I don't know if they know it or not, but they are. They're my trees. I own those trees. Like you own your cat. Yeah, how can you own a cat? How can you... That's my wife. Or that's my car. I mean, conventionally, of course, and we have laws and so forth that support that... the ebb and flow of that kind of dynamic, because you can't just have like the love shop, people just coming in and helping themselves to chairs and cats. So, we do get that kind of inequality that develops through that, the imbalance. On a spiritual level, there's no big or small. There's no rich or poor. On just meeting as human beings. There's a lovely story. It was an Australian politician. Callum might remember. I don't know. He was the Prime Minister, and he was canvassing for the next election, and he was in an old people's home because they vote. He's going around shaking hands and meeting people, and he's talking to this old lady and saying about he's going to do this and do that, and he's looking at this kind of vacant look at her. He says, do you know who I am? And she says, no, I don't, dear, but if you ask the lady at reception, she might be able to tell you. This presumption that you know who I am and this is my chair and people come to the monastery, they don't know what monks are. Well, some. Mm-hmm. Some people do. Some people, to presume, my rights, my space, my wealth, my social status, all of that stuff, and we build that up. So coming back to mindfulness, in a sense, what it's looking to do is to bring that into kind of conformity. I don't know if that's... to be honest, I've never really made a study of what's being put out there in terms of contemporary mindfulness practices. What I do kind of figure, though, that and in fact, I think John Kabat-Zinn has said he regrets taking the Buddhism out of his teaching. His initial thought was to do that, to make it more palatable. I believe he's expressed regret over that. Because it's the idea that somehow I will become, this wonderful person that everybody will like, and I won't get angry. But will I be happy? It's not. It certainly helps if you're not getting angry all the time. It's a much better kind of environment to exist in with friends and family and all the rest of it, if you're not getting stressed all the time. So sure, if you've got a leaky tap or dodgy electrics or something, fiddle with them, and do a course or and get it right. But does that ultimately make you happy? It can make life more pleasant, more comfortable. But my feeling, that enlightenment, which I think in terms of ultimate happiness and complete freedom and all of that, enlightenment is not always accompanied by pleasant feeling. There's
super interesting.
There's an expectation that somehow when I get enlightened, everybody will like me, everybody will agree with me, you know, I'll always be a parking space when I go to the supermarket. You know, it'd be perfect. And that kind of image of heaven is kind of like that. Everybody's dressed in spotless white and in their mid-30s or something. And I'll be able to recognise my mother even though she'll be 180. You know, because that's what I'd like. I'd like that. It'd be nice. I miss my mother and I miss my father and so on, you know. And that kind of idea that somehow there'll be a state of something at some point when all of my dreams come true, when I get everything that I want, you know, through the grace of God. And all. They're nice ideas, but functionally, practically, enlightenment, you still get sick, still going to get old. You know, people are going to still think you've got a funny shaped nose. Or whatever, you know, that kind of a thing. So the thing is being at peace with all conditions. You're not trying to fix them, although we can, you know, we can make adjustments. We're not particularly trying to fix them, we're trying to be at peace with them. And just seeing, you know, there's actually nothing wrong with anger. It's just an energy, like heat and cold. Lived in Canada for many years, you know, -30. It's okay. I mean, it's really cold. But, you know, you make a few choices and put boots on and and look forward to the summer. Oh, apart from the bugs. They have a lot of bugs in spring. But, you know, that idea that somehow there's going to be a point in time, you know, when you get the mortgage paid and, you know, when you get the new car or you get the new smartphone and you get the new wife and you get the, you know, whatever, you know, and there'd be no more suffering. And that carrot on a stick, you never really, it never really comes. So kind of, I think there's a subtle, you know, underlying with the mindfulness. As I say, I can't really speak with any authority, but it kind of concerns me that the heart of it. I mean, I've actually seen, like with yoga, you know, the 8 limbs of yoga. What do you see now? You know, there's hot yoga and there's jazz yoga and a lot of it's just, you know, body beautiful, distraction, entertainment. It's lost the spirit, the essence, you know. Raja yoga, jnana yoga, you know, these kinds of aspects of yoga that are, you know, deeply spiritual. It's become a commodity, you know, with the leotards and the mats and the, I don't know, all the, like so many things.
Yeah.
You know, sports, jiu-jitsu, I'm sure there's trendy headbands that all the super-duper guys have got.
Yeah.
So that, I see kind of that meditation packaged as mindfulness kind of just gets commercialised. It's a bit rough maybe to say dumbed down, but yeah, just conveniently packaged. You know, these phone apps now, one called Mindspace, I think there's more than one.
Yeah.
It was one of the first, I believe. You know, you can get a little 30-second snip, you know. And it's not bad. I'm not denigrating these kinds of things, but it falls short for me, you know, because, you know, I've committed, you know, I'm doing this, and to me it seems, you know, like the innate essence of life, not just humanity, but just life is, for want of a better word, spiritual. Then we get so distracted, mostly through sensuality and the pursuit of pleasure, that somehow is the fulfillment or the resolution of what, you know, of human birth. That's what it's all about. As long as you've got plenty of parties to go to, or you know, lots of tailor-made suits in the wardrobe. I don't know. You know, that kind of misses a tremendous potential for true peace, true love. You know, I mean, I don't know, a lot of love is commercialized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, John, do you think more and more you see the rise in the number of mental health issues, depression, anxiety? New Zealand, we have this problem with suicide as well.
Yeah.
Then, what's your opinion about that? What do you address? It's the mind. It's not being trained well. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just what's being presented as the thing to do is not the thing to do. You know, young people, they should be taking drugs and going to parties, or I don't know. It's a very complex question, but the guys in prison, why are they there? They get caught in a cycle, essentially of consumption.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's consuming drugs or and then you need the money for the drugs, but they never got the education or the lack. So yeah, a lot of it is about education, and the values that are being presented. I mean, streaming now. I mean, kids by the time they're 10 years old, they should have their career mapped out, and they'll be going to this university. I mean. I don't know whether New Zealand's worse. I mean, the suicide rate, that's quite disturbing. New Zealand, this incredibly beautiful, spacious. I mean, we don't have the density of population. I see how that affects societies. I don't know. It's people are basically looking in the wrong place. We have rehab people, drug addicts, alcoholics, depression, people who are definitely, or sort of formally classified as not quite on the main track, and talk with them, and they understand. They're nodding their heads. When I say all the sorts of things I've been saying, nodding their head and saying, life's got to mean more than just blah, 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 blah. But how do they access that? Where is it being made available? Can they access that? Are they so entrapped in that already through that youthful conditioning, the cycles of addiction? Effectively, people become addicted to so many things, internet and all the things that are around the internet. There's lots of opportunities for divergence, materialism, clothes, food, vehicles, accessories, tattoos. Why does anybody want tattoos?
Yes, I know. I do regret all mine.
Well, it's not to criticise and say it's wrong, but
we do, and it's.
Yeah, because you think it's going to make you look cool, or you're going to get more women, or
so true.
People are going to be afraid of you, or it looks tough, or it looks whatever. It's artistic. We can rationalise it in so many ways. I had an ear pierced. I really went through quite a bit. It was very trendy. You got one ear pierced. You had to be sure which one it was, because I can't remember even one meant you were gay, and I nearly got the wrong one done. But I was really thinking, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And I could see peer group pressure.
So true. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have to think about what kind of an earring you have, because that's a statement. That's me. That identifies me. Whether I have a cross hanging there, or a skull and crossbones, or whatever, that defines me. As do clothes, as do haircuts, as do so many things. But I'm not any of those things. Ultimately, I'm not any of those things. And it's somehow for these people who have issues with, social issues, the identification with all of that, it's somehow that they've just got boxed into a corner. How to get out? I don't know. I mean, tell them all to come to the monastery. It's too extreme. They can't. To make that switch, it does. The progression that we make, I mean, sometimes we have epiphanies, we have insights, like wow, it's like life-changing. finding Jesus or finding the Buddha, or you'll never do that. He's been dead a long time. But you know, those kinds of, when you wake up, when you see one's life, or just life in general, from a completely different perspective, it's like, what, you know, you're going to rub your eyes and, you know, Alice through the looking glass kind of thing, you know. It's like, whoa, okay. Can be life-changing. But for most people, it's plod, 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 gradually developing a deeper understanding, you know, and seeing, oh yeah, that's pretty. Why did I smoke cigarettes for 20 years? At least half of those that time, knowing it's a completely stupid thing to do. But it took a long time to actually break that cycle, to break that habit, that addiction.
Yeah.
So yeah, how do people, addiction to what? To music, to all of that stuff, fashion, food. You need to be seen, and friends. I mean, when I gave one of the first times I decided to give up taking drugs, there was one particular instance. I went to visit some friends, and you know, the bag came out and rolled up some joints, and I just passed it on. I said, "What's wrong?" Have some. I said, "No, I'm not smoking anymore." So what's wrong? You don't like our weed? Or, you know, the feeling of judgment was what I started to feel.
Yeah.
They were feeling that I was saying, what you're doing is wrong, and I'm pure. I'm the good guy, and you guys are bad guys, taking drugs. It wasn't like that at all. I just, for me personally, I wanted to stop. And it was awful. It was just really awful. So I left. And one of the guys came with me and agreed that was pretty awful. And I ended up going back and taking drugs again, because where did I fit? I had no friends. All of my friends was tied up in drugs. That's what we all did together. Whether it's, you know, riding bikes and sneering at old ladies, or, you know, raising poodles or daffodils, or, you know, we find our peer groups and these are our friends. This is and society and culture is one of the very defining factors of who I am. By association, I mix with these kinds of people, because these kinds of people make me feel comfortable. They accept me. They allow me to be kind of like this, and I feel comfortable, more or less, being like this. But that's a prison. You know, if you suddenly shave your moustache off, people are going to start looking at you funny. Vanderson, what's wrong? You found God or something? I don't know, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I went through, you know, during that phase, several periods of intense loneliness. Just not knowing where do I go, who do I be, how do I be? Because I had no viable alternative. So for young people, or, you know, people who are caught in those cycles, where do they, like the guys in prison, they get out of prison, where do they go?
Super loss, yeah.
You know, they go back with their families, which is a repetition of the same thing. They end up hanging out with their mates, repetition of the same thing. Difficult to get a job, or whatever, you know, so that getting caught in those cycles, it is difficult to shed. You know, talk about psychologically about armouring, about masks, things like that. We all have them, whether they're tattoos or facial hair or robes or whatever. These are things that I not necessarily hide behind, but that kind of protect me, send out the signals like this, like that, you know. Being able to shed that. So one of my I have several definitions of enlightenment as being able to stand naked in the presence of God.
Wow.
So, you know, God is the representation of, you know, ultimate wisdom, all-seeing, all-knowing. And I'm there completely, no masks, no armour, no clothes, like absolutely nothing, no accessories, no walking stick, no nothing, just in a completely empty space with nothing. In the presence of, well, everything. There's a Douglas Adams, you familiar with him?
No.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Ah, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This famous book, yeah.
So he would say, I'm a big fan. He had a thing, Zaphod Beeblebrox, who was the kind of anti-hero, was hijacked and taken off to the Frog Star. And he was going to be put into the total perspective vortex. The total, heavy music. The total perspective vortex. When you see yourself in the perspective of everything, totality, the vastness of the universe. You see yourself as this totally insignificant, invisible, non-being. So, and there's all this screaming in the background of people going into the total perspective vortex. So he goes in, and there's dramatic music and so forth, so he goes in, and then a few minutes later he comes out the other side, and the manager of the total perspective, he said, "You went in and you came out." He said, What did you feel? What did you think? He said, "It just confirms what I already knew. I've got to be the coolest guy in the universe." And to have that, sure, but as an egotistical statement, rather than a statement of purity or actually selflessness. Because if you're fully acceptant of the fact that, when all the armouring and everything, when the onion's been peeled and you see that there's, in essence, kind of particularly nothing in the core, being completely at peace with that is being completely at peace. You can go into a confined space, you can go into an infinitely vast space. And there's no perspective. There's no relativity. I'm big, I'm small, I'm important, I'm unimportant, I'm rich, I'm poor, I'm beautiful, I'm ugly. That whole concept of duality falls away. The gesture we use a lot, making Anjali, so I often explain that as the resolution of duality. So you have left and right in terms of hands, big and small, male and female, rich and poor, and the resolution of that over the heart, or the neutrality of that, the non-dual state held over the heart.
That's interesting. So, John, is that the consciousness? It's when we peel all the layers and be able to see who we actually is. It's that your views of what's your view of consciousness better?
Well, so the issue of who. See, that's about identity, and there's no who. We can say, the language. So consciousness, mindfulness, awareness, presence, knowing, wisdom. You think, it's synonymous. They're kind of pointing to that same. So where is that? Is that personal? So I would say what you, conventionally speaking, what you are aware of is certainly different from what I'm aware of. But is awareness the same? Is your awareness the same as my awareness? So like we're sitting in this room, sitting in space, and I would say, this is my space. Don't crowd my space, man. And then when I get up, is there some kind of shadow, or do I reserve my space? Can you still see this sort of shimmering Kusalo space that's mine? Well, because it's the same space. We're in the same space. In the space of this room, say this room contains space, well, this room in itself is contained in space. And the space in this room is actually no different than the space outside the room, which is no different than the space on Mars, or whether literally we can scientifically, but conceptually space as a medium is like awareness for me. It just is. There is awareness. So as a quality of life, So we can talk consciousness. We can say, trees are conscious. So, classic Zen koan, does a dog have Buddha nature? Yeah, I've got no problem with that. I think, sure. It's maybe got a way to go before it can fully realise the extent of that nature. Does a tree have Buddha nature? A tree is sentient. A rock? I don't know, I mean, as expressions of, the universe, life. And, if we, just the word God, as a kind of a sort of a word, but we're so habituated to identify with conditions. So God, therefore, that becomes the old man in the sky, and I mean, most people don't really go with that one anymore, but they sort of do, because you've got to hang your hat somewhere. My hat, my chair, me. I am. So the idea of stepping into the total perspective vortex and just losing it all, any points of reference, I am not. And that, the 1929 Wall Street financial crisis, how many people committed suicide? Mm-hmm. Like, I am rich, and then all of a sudden the next day, I am nobody. And the difficulty of imagining life beyond that. Yeah, well, I'll just get a job flipping burgers. Huh? Doesn't make sense. I can't do that. I'm a rich...
It's not me.
No, it's not me. All my friends would not invite me to parties. So, again, connecting back to, talking about suicides and people with social issues, alcoholism and things like that, in a sense, you can blame it on a limited imagination. To be able to imagine yourself to be anything. Anything you want to be.
Oh, that's so interesting perspective. Yeah, super interesting.
But really difficult, because I can't. I have no educational, cultural, gender points of reference.
Lack of imagination.
I mean, it's not as a criticism.
Yeah.
It kind of is in terms of the education system, where numbers and computers and efficiency and production and all of that is so encouraged. But just the imagination in and of itself, for itself, that you can be anything you want. I mean, of course, you can't. I was going to say you can't be a woman, but actually, if you really wanted to. But that kind of thing, to make the shift. You see, for me, I never had both my parents were quite adventurous, really, so I'm quite grateful in that. They would just do things, try things, give it a go. It's a kind of classic, give it a go, mate. You just give it your best shot. You go for it. So they were kind of, quite independent in that way. So for me, becoming a monk wasn't a big... For some people, it's quite a traumatic, to give up all of this, the life and renunciation and commitment and all of those things. But those kind of, changing careers, changing jobs, changing relationships, can be quite anxious challenges for people. Don't know. What will it be like? Don't know. What will happen tomorrow? I mean, we like to think we know. Will the sun come up? Statistically, there's a good chance. But actually, I don't know. Is your car still parked on the street?
Good question.
I hope so, because I want to go back to the morning. But, somebody could have quietly snuck in and lifted it and wheeled it away. We don't know. So we like that kind of predictability, and we'll often settle for less than ideal. Better the devil you know than the one you don't. People who live in abusive relationships, it's kind of for whatever reason they end up in them, and then that becomes like the norm. Familiar points of reference, they may not necessarily be pleasant, but they get out of that relationship, like the guys get out of prison, they end up back in another abusive relationship. Those cycles, those habits, those addictions, if you will, they're difficult to break.
That's so interesting. Ajahn, talk about that. Do you miss anything from the I'm gonna say the normal life? Tea. Okay, I'm gonna swap it here.
We emptied the pot, have we?
Yeah, I think it's gone. We need more water.
More tea.
Sorry, more tea.
If we had more tea, we would be happy. There wouldn't be any suffering. So what was the question? Do I miss anything?
Yeah, from the normal life.
Normal life, no. Interesting terminology, because this thing you introduced, the rise of the super being. So I would completely deflate that. Yeah, the rise of the normal guy. The promotion and almost the demand to be a super being, like in work. I don't know that much about what my son does, but there's a lot of pressure, a lot of stress to perform. He's in the digital tech industry. Because technology allows us to do so much more, we should do more. So people that, what used to be 2 jobs, people are now working as 1.5 jobs for one person. So the half a job gets split, so out of 3 people, one's unemployed or made redundant, and the pressures to keep that kind of production and so forth. So what is it to be normal? What is it to be normal? Not super. We like the image of, like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, all of these kinds of, they're to be able to fly through the sky and see through walls and etc., etc. But to be totally just normal. Forrest Gump. Do you ever see that? Why was that a hit movie? Because he was just this dumb, normal guy that just bumbled through life and kind of was lucky enough to get it right, because he had a loving mum who taught him good morals and values, and he kind of got it right. Lovable. Don't we love that?
Yeah.
So one of the key teaching of the Buddha, the first sermon that he gave in Varanasi, we were talking about that earlier, in the Sanat, the Dhammacakka Sutta. So it's sometimes translated as the setting in motion, the wheel of the norm, that which is normal. What it is to be a normal human being, without masks and defence, to just be, they say in the movies, all you got to do is act naturally. Just be honest. John Wayne. John Wayne couldn't act for peanuts. He just did John Wayne. He just kind of said, "Oh, well, hi, and flicked a gun around." He did exactly the same in every movie. But there was something about his kind of honest, and he was a big guy and all sorts of things, and a nice guy by all accounts. And that thing of just, you don't have to pretend. You can just be totally honest, which is that standing naked in the presence of God, because there's nothing to fear. This is me. This is who I am. It's just me. Nothing particular. I as a being, as a person, I've got certain skills, and I can do things that some people can't do. People say, "Oh, that's amazing. You can do that." I say, "Well, no. It's just I can do that. That's all." Pat your head and rub your stomach. There's nothing super about that. It's just some people can bend over backwards. Some people can touch their toes. Sometimes I can. But that doesn't make me super. As a super being, it just means that this particular set of conditions has certain attributes. Some people can sing. Some people can't. Some people can run fast. Some people can't. And those that can, are they actually better people? Stephen Hawkins, the guy in the wheelchair, the super scientist.
Yeah.
Is he a super being? You know, it's all sort of, in terms of bodies, but he's got this amazing mind.
Yeah.
So we can pick on certain qualities and say, oh, well, this is super, this is not. This is beautiful, this is ugly. And it's back to that whole kind of dualistic way of thinking. But things are the way they are. And the truth of the way things are. It's always like this. It's always now. I mean, past is just a memory, future the unknown.
Mm-hmm. Now
Is the knowing. Ajahn Sumedho, not in a Kusalo original. But that, that Eckhart Tolle, very popular, the power of now.
Yeah.
We have nothing else. We talk about tomorrow, don't know. We can only, it's like if you're ever going to be happy, if you're ever going to be free, if you're ever going to be enlightened, if you're ever going to be anything, it's now. It's always now.
Yeah. Maybe that's the goal of the super being. It's accepted now.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can use the term, say, well, the Buddha was a superman,
Yeah.
super duper. We can respect that and honour that. It's more sense of nobility rather than superness. But that thing of normality, enlightenment, the ultimate ordinariness.
It's so true.
Well, this pursuit, the pursuit of the extraordinary. I want my cornflakes with 10% free. I'll buy those ones. Why buy the other ones? And so they market that. They play on that desire, which is really the root of suffering. We're always wanting. We want something that we haven't got. It's all future and past based. What I did wrong in the past, or what I missed out on in the past, or what I got in the past or didn't get in the past, what I will get in the future, what I should get in the future, what's my right in the future. There's always this pushing and pulling. And what have I got now? Well, I've got this. More tea. The mark of a successful monk, an endless supply of tea.
So, John, what's it's Buddhism, and what's your favorite Buddhist teaching?
Probably divided. That one I mentioned, the Dhammacakka Sutta, which is the first teaching that the Buddha gave in Varanasi, in northern India.
Can you tell more about it, please?
It's kind of a neat story. So the Buddha gets enlightened. He's in Bodh Gaya, and this is abbreviated. He had previously been with 5 other samanas, gurus, truth seekers, whatever, doing a lot of ascetic practice, and he almost died, almost drowned on the river, and he said, this is ridiculous, So he started eating like regular meals, and the other guys thought he'd gone soft. Eating, so they left him. So then he ends up under the Bodhi tree and gets enlightened, and he's thinking, well, who can he teach? His 2 previous teachers were both deceased. Then he remembered his 5 companions, so he walked from Bodh Gaya to Sarnath, met up with them in the deer park. Initially, when he arrived, their reaction was, "Oh God, here he comes, old softy. we'll just ignore him. He'll go away. We can get on with the real practice." But there was something about his eminence, his presence, his being. So they went up and greeted him and prepared a seat and so forth. And cutting the story short, he started teaching this particular. I think it's probably we have it as a kind of a neat little package. It probably took place over several sessions. I mean, maybe even weeks. Who really knows? And then it's been the sense of discussion. What did he actually talk about? And it was compiled in, as we now have it. And as we chanted, a lot of the suttas were, in Pali for chanting, because it's an easy way to remember stuff. So at the heart of it is the Four Noble Truths. And you know why they're called truths?
Why?
Because they're true. And there's four of them. So,
Can you tell those four, please?
of course I can. The first one, so the Buddha began with basic human experience, whereas most other religions start at the top end. You know, the whole kind of heaven, you know, being one with God and all that sort of stuff. The Buddha started with, first noble truth is there is suffering, or there is unsatisfactoriness, or dissatisfaction, disquiet, disease, that sort of thing, you know, anger, jealousy, boredom, loneliness, fear. All of these things are forms of suffering. You know, everybody nods their head and agrees.
Yeah.
I mean, are they pleasant? Do you want them? No.
No.
This is not. I want to, you know, want the opposite. So the second is the cause, which is craving. So we want the opposite. We don't want that, and we do want the other thing. So if it's hot, I want to get rid of the heat, and I want to get the cool. If there's too many people, I want to get rid of the people and get the space, or you know. So that kind of push and pull is all time based. It's the same as, you know, the thing is in the past, and particularly movement towards the future, because the past we all agree we can't change, but the future, so I can control through power, through money, often, social status, fame, and all these kinds of things. So the cause of suffering is desire. What do you want that you haven't got? And what have you got that you don't want? So you're trying to push and pull, get rid of this so that you can get that, because it's pleasant. So the third noble truth, so most people agree, they can see the dynamic of that. If you could just be content with what you've actually got, then you'd be content. There wouldn't be any suffering. But the paradox is that, sure, you know, the tap's dripping and the electrics are dodgy. You can do something. And that's the extrapolation of that possibility for action implies potentially, and particularly these days with so much technology available, it implies control. That I can control my world. I can define my world, right down to the colour of the wallpaper and, you know, the font on the welcome doormat. You know, I can control this. But of course, clearly there's limitations. The general, I mean, very broadly, the general delusion is around money. Because of course, the more money you've got, the more power you've got, the more influence you have. You can control the font. You can phone up the people in China and say, "Can I get this doormat with a, you know, something or other font?" "Certainly, sir. It will cost you an extra." "No problem. Just send me the thing that's going to make me happy." And the yacht and the island and the, you know, all of these things, the ski resort, because that's what will make me happy. So, recognising the limitations of that. So the third noble truth really is kind of a no-brainer. If craving is the cause, or desire is the cause of suffering, just let go of craving. The state of desirelessness. So, you know, what people ask me, "What is there anything you want? You know, this economy of gifts, I want to give you something. What would you?" "Oh, there's nothing." "You know, there must be something you want." "No. I live a very simple life. There's really nothing that I want. A younger body, if you could organise that." Joking, of course, but... So, the fewness of needs, another little quotable quote. "Blessed be a moderate poverty, for he who possesses less is the least possessed." You know, it's a moderate poverty, it's not extreme poverty. So it's a simple life.
Yes.
So the less you need, the less money you need. The less money you need, the less you have to work. The less you have to work, the more time you have. To do what? Well, just to
Being.
be at peace. Or,
Mm.
yeah. So the fourth noble truth, so there's the suffering, the cause of suffering, the ending of suffering, and then the fourth one is the way leading to that, the path of practice, which takes quite a bit of... It starts, though, with right view, clear seeing, that we have to kind of wake up to the cycles of becoming and attachment and addiction and all of that. You have to wake and see that and say, no, I don't... Another definition of enlightenment, independent happiness. Happiness that's not dependent on anything. You know, I mean, having even health. Am I always going to be healthy? No. Am I always going to be young? Am I always going to be rich? Am I always going to be... No. So if my happiness is always dependent on a certain set of conditions, you know, is my wife always going to love me? Is my son ever going to Skype, get it together? Maybe not. If my happiness is dependent on all these things happening, then I'm invariably going to be frustrated. It's back to desire again. Because if my happiness is dependent, then I want that dependency to, those needs to be met. That's what I want. If I don't get what I want, then I suffer. Throw a tantrum, and I get a machine gun and go and, no, that's in America. I'm not renowned for my political correctness today. No, I mean, I just read recently, there's been another. I mean, it's just...
Yeah. One after the
what's
other.
Well, just... But, you know, when we had Christchurch, what's in the minds of those people? It's not happiness, it's not contentment, it's not joy, it's not peace, it's not clarity. You know. So how do we... I mean, it's not never mind about them. We can, you know, politically choices can be made in the education system and all kinds of stuff can be... But what's important is to start here. If I'm suffering, if I'm not free, then how can I expect it of others? How can I demand it of others? Why don't they? You know. So, you know, in terms of people often ask, you know, what do you monks do? Well, we're on a permanent peace demonstration, 24 hours a day. Well, you know, trying.
Yeah.
Not saying we necessarily succeed, but
Yeah, that's
trying
great.
to exemplify. Excuse me.
That's so true.
So, you know, just the basic standard for Buddhists is the five precepts. Nothing amazing, non-killing, non-stealing, social responsibility, particularly sexual, like fidelity, right speech, so honesty particularly, and sobriety. Nothing particularly weird about that. But how many people can tick all 5 boxes? Yeah, I never did as a young man. Usually the first one. I lived a pretty harmless life. I never had a fight or anything like that. I usually just ran away. But, you know, all the other 4, awful, you know, and suffered accordingly. I can see that. So, but I have to start where I can't demand it of others, but I can require it of myself. I can ask it of myself. You know, come on, Kusalo, be a good guy.
So, John, are we all addicted to thoughts?
Thoughts, mostly. Yeah. It's a very... excuse me.
And what's gonna be the way out of the cycle as well, of keep this massive addiction of thinking and overthinking. When this How can we break the cycle?
Well, the thing with, like alcoholics, they're always alcoholics, but they don't drink. Those that have managed it. So it's not like, moderate recognition. It's just in terms of stopping. So there is a gradual, like a phasing in terms of thought. But so one to consider that the natural state of the mind is empty. So I use analogy of a glass of water. Yeah? So there's tea. Yeah, there's tea here. What is it? Well, it's just water, and it has some leaves and stuff in it. And well, there aren't actually any leaves in it, but the coloration. But we don't call it water. We call it tea. This is tea, but it's actually just water with some tea that's been added. So soft drinks, the pink stuff. It's just water. Mostly water, 90-something%. It's just had a bit of colouring added to it, bit of sugar maybe, bit of gas, and we call it whatever we call it, soft drink. So to see that the mind is essential. I mean, and in the water you can extract the chemicals or the colouring or the tea or whatever, distill that, and you end up with water. Mm-hmm. So you're going back to that, and excuse me. So the mind. I'm not saying, there's this question of, nature or nurture when kids are born. Is there a completely blank slate, or is there some carryover in terms of past lives, or not to go there, but to see that you figure that there's not a lot. Mm. And they learn, they get given, things get added. You're a boy. Bloop, put that in. So what is it? It's not water, it's not empty space, it's a boy. And you're a good boy, or you're a bad boy, or you're a clever boy, or you're really stupid. Or all these things get added, but what's the essential medium there that we're looking at? So it's back to space again. This space, we come into the space, we exit the space, we go into another space. And space is a container. So a thought gets added into the mind. Yeah? Vanderson, you're so handsome. Why are you laughing? See, plop! There's a kind of and that. So then we call it Vanderson the handsome. That's the state of the mind. Whether you add tea, or whether you add sugar, or whether you add a pleasant thought, or whether you add an unpleasant thought, what we tend to identify is the additives rather than the mind itself. So we're talking again back to awareness. So what you're aware of, or what you're thinking, is an aspect of your experience. That's all thought is. And what I'm thinking, or the nature of my experience, is different. But the awareness of that is in effect the water. You step back from the content and get that. You just see a thought is a thought. An emotion is just an emotion. And it might be an unpleasant thought, or an unpleasant emotion, or an awkward or difficult. You see, that's all it is. And it's not ultimate. It doesn't define me 100%. It's just there. So then we can actually see the possibility of choice. I can actually choose to continue thinking this thought, or drinking this tea, or getting a can of soft drink, or something or other, or not. Mm-hmm. And again, limitations, but recognising the principle that's involved there. So to some extent, meditation is almost like a distillation. But it's not that you necessarily get rid of, because it's not a nihilistic process. It's a process of understanding. Once you understand the nature, the relational dynamic that's involved there, you just don't take it personally. you're not possessed. He who possesses less, it's a sense of possession. And that nice play on the word, kind of demonic possession. They are like demons. Some of those thoughts, they get in your head. Inception. DiCaprio, what's the most resilient thing? It's a thought. And talk about inception, about planting thoughts into the mind. But the thing is, we know, it says that line, he says, if I tell you not to think about elephants, what are you thinking about? Well, elephants. It gets in there, but you know that it's been put in there. What we mostly know is, or what we mostly is, we don't know. It's just it's not in there, it's me. So the process of identification, I am these thoughts are mine. They define me. I'm an angry person, just deal with it. It's who I am. You either like me or you don't like me. It's... You ever consider the possibility of not being an angry person? But that's who I am. It's, kind of extreme, because much thought that's just quite trivial, actually. But it dribbles on, doesn't it? It dribbles on, and a lot of it is about that empty space. The total perspective vortex. I can't be in a vacuum. I can't be naked. There was a movie, really old, called The Invisible Man. The only way he could be seen was to cover himself. So he was defined by the clothes he wore. And I can't remember if he had a mask or bandages or something like that. But that gave him form, gave him shape, gave him definition. And we kind of do that with thought. Those kinds of thoughts. And there's just so many of them. So the idea of taking up a meditation object, like the breath or whatever, turns our focus away from. So when you're standing on one leg, it's not a completely silly suggestion, but when you're standing on one leg, what you're concentrating, what the mind is preoccupied with or interested in is balance.
Balance.
So you're not thinking about, whether to get that new cat food and impress the cat and it'll love you more, and or whatever, the new handbag for the girlfriend, or you're not preoccupied with that. You're just, your mind is kind of distilled into something much, much simpler, much quieter, much more calm, still. And that kind of experience of a mind that is still, there's nothing. Awareness remains. You're not unconscious, you're not black out or anything. And that's why sleep is so attractive to something. Just, just zonk out, go, crash and burn. Sleep, the great escape. But what we're looking at is quite the opposite. It's complete and full awareness, even in sleep.
Yeah.
So, the body clearly needs rest, but awareness, one can sustain awareness through what we normally think of as sleep. So that what we're aware of is just comes and goes and changes. It's not ultimately anything. Certainly not me. I think, in terms of bodies, because it's quite a persistent. But you think back, you used to be this big, even smaller. Where's that body gone? Is it the same body? The house that gets renovated, they build a little 2-bedroom cottage and then they put an extra piece on and then they renovate this and pull that bit down and add a bit there. Is it the same house?
That's interesting.
The progression, for the people living in the house, yeah, sure, it's the same house. Oh, we made a few changes and things, of course. But if a person came and saw the first house and then came 20 years later, 50 years later, what happened to the old house? Oh, it's still here. We just changed a few things around. So this body has gone through that same You know, say every 7 years you get a cell, you know, your cells are all replaced. Maybe, I don't know. But as a reflection, you see, certainly it's changed.
Mm.
And it's, you know, the curious thing, watching a body die. That's what I'm doing now. You know, it's not, it's you know, it's downhill, downhill all the way. Yeah, you just watch it fall apart. The faculties start to go, and I don't want to. You know, I'm addicted. I'm attached to youth. I don't want to get old, you know, and frail and senile and losing my memory and not being able to hear people. And technology can support to a certain degree, but there has to be that letting go. You know, just a recognition of this is the truth of the way things are. This is how it is. Right now, right now, right now, right now.
So true. Ajahn, if someone wants to learn more about Buddhism, to learn how to meditate, how can the person, what's your advice?
Usually say, sit down and shut up. Another, you know, when you're crossing the road, I don't know if they still do it, probably, stop, look and listen. Just stop and look and listen. Don't think, don't analyse or anything, just look, just look around. Just notice, listen. Because there's a receptive state there. I'm not trying to get or trying to control. I've stopped. And I'm just looking and I'm listening. I'm smelling or whatever, you know, just a sense of receiving this moment. So, I mean, that quality is, we've all got that, otherwise you'd be dead. You know, crossing the road, if you don't stop, look and listen, you get run over. So, and everybody does it. But the implications of that, what you're really paying attention, because it's critical, you don't want to die. You want to be alive, but to be truly alive is to be truly aware, truly awake.
That's super powerful. Super powerful.
Yeah.
So Ajahn,
Rise of the super being.
the rise of the super being. That's the list for the rise of the super being. So Ajahn, thank you so much for your time. So again, Ajahn, it's Ajahn Kusalo. It's the senior monk at the monastery in Stokes Valley. So you can find more information. What's the website, Ajahn?
Just Google Stokes Valley Monastery.
Monastery.
It's Bodhinyana Rama, the Garden of Enlightened Knowing.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
But try and spell it over the phone. Email address, you know, kusalo@bodhinyana Rama.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to find the peace, definitely that's a beautiful place. It's one of special place for me. And again, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, and we're gonna keep putting the Marquise up for a few more years together.
Go on a trip to India.
Yes. Let's do that. So Ajahn, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Much
pleasure.
appreciate.
No,
Thank you.
good.